What's up, guys? This is Dan Watson from learningcameras.com, and I've got the Sony A7 here, and I've been using this for about a week now. And we're going to take a look at a lot of the hardware, get into the nitty-gritty of some of the details of the camera, and after all, take a look at the image quality, see if this is really a capable camera worthy of your $1,800. Now, once again, like always, we do have the full quality RAW files and JPEGs that we took on this review available for you to download at learningcameras.com, so you can feel like you've got this Sony A7. Edit those RAW files, take a look at them, see if they really meet your expectations. Take a look at the high ISO files. You know, don't take my word for this camera, and download those yourself. Learningcameras.com, and you can really judge the quality and see if it's up to your standards. Now, once again, this is with the kit 28 to 70 millimeter lens. It's not a cheap lens at all. However, it's just not as good as I would hope for a nice full frame camera like this. Now, to start off with, taking a look at the hardware, it's kind of a very interesting design. Part of it seems a little bit retro, and then the right side of the camera feels a little bit more like a DSLR. So we've got a nice grip on the camera, good DSLR feel to it, nice grip on the back too, very easy to hold on to. And then the rest of the camera is more of this kind of retro looking, angled, a little bit harsher on the fingers, kind of slips out of your hand a little bit. So, you know, it's a nice metal build, and it's kind of a love it or hate it design, and it's kind of a mesh of two different designs. So, I mean, we've got a lot of more retro looking cameras now, like the Fuji X series. I do think the Fuji cameras look a little bit better. However, we do have this nice grip on here that's pretty easy to hold on to. It's a lot larger than some of your other mirrorless cameras, but this does have a full frame sensor, and that is huge. So we're dealing with a nice 24 megapixels, really pretty much the same sensor as what's in the Nikon D600 from what we can see. You do have Sony E mount, and this is a new E mount for full frame sensor. So none of your other E mount lenses are going to fit on this, and none of your other A mount lenses are going to fit on this without an adapter. Sony does sell an adapter, so you're going to want to pick that up if you already have Sony lenses. Otherwise, you're going to be starting from scratch again. This is their 28 to 70 kit lens. The aperture is not that great on it, 3.5 to 5.6. I don't love it because of that. I'd love to see a 2.8 aperture, or at least like up to f4 or something like that from this, and we don't get it with this Sony. So you're going to be looking to A lenses to get something like that, and then you're going to be using the adapter, which is going to be a downside to this. For a nice full frame camera, I'd love to see some better lenses available specifically for this new mount. Otherwise, just go ahead and put in the A mount into it, and we'll deal with the lenses that Sony has from that. Now, looking around the rest of it, it's kind of a bit of a jumble on the back of it and up on the top. You've got a lot of dials, a lot of buttons. You've got 3 custom modes on here, custom dials that can be programmed to anything you want. I love having those. However, they're in a little bit of awkward places. The C2 button is nice and easy to get to, but we have a C1 button really up here on the top, tough to get to, and a C3 also shares the erase button down at the bottom. So it's going to be kind of a mixed jumble getting to those buttons, but once you learn where they are, I'm really happy to see them. So you're going to get to know the layout. It's going to take some time, a little bit more than what we're used to on even DSLRs, because of the arrangement on that. However, once you do, you're going to be rewarded to a lot of functionality and controls. The shutter button also has a very awkward placement. It's not up at the front where we're used to. It's a little bit more on the top of the camera, and so that takes some getting used to, and I kind of find I have to reach for that a little bit more. Also, the movie button is kind of awkwardly located on the right side of the camera here, and it took me a while to actually find the location of that, because that's not normally where we see a movie button on there. But I mean, once you figure that out, it's going to be a good camera, and I'm happy to have all of the controls on there. Now, the Sony A7 does have an electronic viewfinder, which we've seen a lot of from Sony. And the electronic viewfinder takes some getting used to if you're used to optical. However, Sony makes one of the best ones on the market right now. In good light, it's like looking through an optical. It's very nice being able to see your exposure that you would be getting in the picture in the viewfinder, so that is a very nice feature. However, when we start getting into dim light, I did notice that it seemed to really start lagging, and it did get very grainy on there. So it's much better in good light, but in bad light, it does start to lag quite a bit. And so that's going to be the negative on that. It's a little bit bigger too, so it kind of adds up some space on the camera. So it's not really the smallest camera in the world. However, it's going to be smaller than any other full frame DSLR, for example, that you're going to get for that. Now Sony does also include an articulating screen on this camera. It is only going to help you for shooting up and down. You do not have any option to be able to rotate this around, so you can maybe take a self-portrait or videotape yourself and see what's on the screen. So unfortunately we only have up-down. I wish that Sony would just adopt what Canon and Nikon are doing and put a normal type articulating screen, but it's better than a fixed screen, and it feels very good in the hand. Now the menu system is a little bit new for Sony. It kind of feels a little bit like what I see on the 5D Mark III. There are tons of menu options going through the screen. It has a little bit less columns than what I see on Canon. However, it's pretty well organized into groups, and you can get a pretty good idea of how things are going on inside the menu system. Now the focus system on the Sony A7 is a little bit different than what we've seen on a lot of cameras. Tons of options. You have the ability to resize your focus point from large to medium to small. I love having that feature, which every camera that had was using a live view autofocus system would have that. It's great to have. I wish my EOS M had it. The focus performance on this is very quick. You do have customizable buttons that can access those focus modes for you, so very easy and quick to change those. Now if you're moving the point from one end to the other, Sony does not have a touch screen, so it's a little bit longer to move that from one side to the other, but overall not bad at all. Now performance, I mean, it's very snappy and quick in good light. You can, as soon as you touch it, it really will focus all the way around. So very good performance from the Sony in that respect. When you start to get in low light, it does hinder quite a bit. And when I started getting into like 6400 ISO or above from that, it had real difficulty focusing, and even a couple of times where it struggled. Now this lens also is not the best for low light because it's a very high aperture, and it's also not very good for macro, so you're not going to get great close-up shots with this. Now getting to the image quality, this is really where the A7 shines. You're talking a full frame 24 megapixel camera, so even in this very small design, you do get the benefit of that full frame sensor. Unbelievable dynamic range. You can really push those shadows, drop those highlights, get almost an HDR type look from a single file. I'm really amazed by how much you're allowed to push the shadows on this camera and still not see virtually any increased grain as a result from doing that. Other than the grain natively there in the image, you're not really seeing any additional grain. So it's very nice. I love the image quality of this camera. The results are very sharp, 24 megapixels, plenty of resolution, lots of room to crop on that one. Now if you do want to use any of the E-series lenses that are not full frame, you can actually do that with this, and it'll just operate at a lower resolution. So you can actually put on your smaller glass and it'll do a sensor crop for you to be able to still use this unbelievable camera with some of those lenses if you do have some of them laying around. Now getting into low light, this is also an area where the A7 shines. I mean, you're talking great image quality up to 1600 ISO. You can hardly tell that you're even shooting at higher ISOs. Above that, you begin to notice some grain creeping in. Almost no detail or color loss all the way, just a little bit at 6400 ISO. After that though, we begin to start losing those colors and details at 12,000 ISO, and again at 25,000, it's pretty much gone there. So unbelievable for performance up to about 6400 ISO. At 12,000, you're gonna really stretch the limits of this camera, and that's about as far as I would go. But overall, great performance that we can really shoot at 1600, 3200 ISO all day long and still be able to make large prints, zoom into 100, and the images still look fantastic. Now this is a Sony camera after all, and Sony is well known for making video cameras, and the A7 does not disappoint in that area. So we're seeing very good image quality when it comes to video. You do have autofocus that works fairly well on this camera. You do have the ability to move those points around just like you would inside of the photo mode. You get plenty of options up to 1080p video at 60 frames a second, so if you want a slow motion, you can do that as well. Very good quality. As far as low light goes, you're going to be seeing it pretty good up until about 1600, 3200 ISO. At 6400, it really started to fall apart just a little bit, so I probably wouldn't go to that level or above, but this is on par with what we've seen from other full frame cameras, and very good indeed. And Sony once again has really upped the notch on this. Now you do also have mic inputs, and you also have a headphone out on this camera, so it's great to see Sony sticking with their video department and putting it all into this camera. Now overall, the Sony A7 is not a cheap camera. $1,700 or more. This is not a camera you're just going to pick up and buy without looking at it. Now, given that it is cheaper than just about every full frame camera out there, it's way cheaper than the Nikon DF that just came out as well. So for a full frame small camera, you're really getting a lot of image quality from a very small design and from a fairly inexpensive design when we consider that. However, I can't help but feel like it feels a little bit more like a first iteration camera from Sony. A lot of that comes to the new lens mount, so you're not going to find a ton of high quality pro lenses that are going to fit this natively. You're going to be looking at getting that lens adapter to fit any of your other Sony lenses on there. So I would have liked to see some higher quality lenses released at the start for this design, maybe a constant f2.8, maybe an f4 lens at least. 5.6 is really just not going to do it for me in a camera such as this. Now, in a lesser quality camera, we can make do with that, but you're talking a pro level image quality and just not pro level glass that's going to fit on this camera to match up with that. But you can put on your full frame lenses, you just need to get that adapter for it. So, the buttons are a little bit interesting on the layout, and it's a little bit confusing to get used to this camera versus some of the other ones as a result. But once you do, it's hard to argue with the Sony A7. I mean, it really takes some unbelievable pictures. You get tons of customization options on here. Now, we do have full Wi-Fi control and NFC pairing, so that's pretty nice. The Wi-Fi control works fairly well. You can download the images. You actually start it from the camera and not from your phone, but you can upload your images. You can control your camera from that. Now, the only options you get, even in manual, is going to be exposure compensation, which is going to work like an auto ISO. So you can control some of those settings from the app, but you're not going to get full shutter and aperture control from the app. However, you do have tons of options on there. Wi-Fi, NFC, those are great to see on a camera like this. So you're really getting a lot of camera for the $1,700, and it's hard to argue with that. So for me, this is going to come down to the lenses. Do you like the lens selection? Do you have the pro lenses that you need, or decent lenses for the Sony camera? And if you want to get the lens adapter to make those work, then this is really a high quality camera, great image quality in a very, very small design. And I mean, you're talking $1,000 less than what Nikon put their DF out. So you're really getting a great camera for that, and Sony has done a great job with the A7. I'm really going to look forward to their second iteration, because I'm sure they're going to have a bunch of lenses out there and some new design options as well. And this is just a great starting point for a nice full frame camera that's very small in size comparably to some of the DSLRs.